Welcome to BBQLane.ca. Today we're making a smoked chicken stew. We're doing it over a charcoal grill, and it's pretty easy to do, so let's get to cooking. We're loading up our charcoal grill here with some charcoal briquettes. We're using a Weber 22-inch charcoal grill with a slow and sear insert, and we'll just pile up the grill or the charcoal on the side there and start getting it lit, and then we'll get inside and start prepping the chicken. We got a nice fire going here, so we'll let that sit for about 10 to 15 minutes or so. As for the chicken, we're going to be spatchcocking this chicken today, so first thing to do is take off the twine and check inside, make sure there's no gizzards or any of that stuff. Spatchcocking a chicken means that we are going to basically take out the backbone and then flatten the chicken so that it cooks more evenly. So get a good sharp pair of kitchen scissors and just cut right alongside that backbone. Once you get closer to the butt of the chicken, it gets a little bit tougher, but you should be able to snip through no problem. And then just go along the other side of the backbone and do the same thing. And you can save that backbone for some chicken stock, or just toss it out, or whatever you really want to do with it. Once it's out, flip the chicken over and use the palms of your hands and flatten it. You'll hear a bit of a crack, and your chicken will be nice and flat and cook really nice and evenly, and it also speeds up the cooking a little bit too. Once you're happy with how even the chicken is, pull back the skin on the breasts a little bit, and we're going to sprinkle some rub in there. And today I'm using a custom rub. The recipe will be up on BBQLane.ca in the next couple of days. Since we're making a stew out of this one, I went for a savory rub. It's a blend of herbs and salt and a little bit of pepper that gives this chicken a really nice savory flavor to it. And just apply the rub liberally over the whole chicken. Make sure you cover as much of it as you can. I always like to do that first little bit under the skin just to get some of the rub on the meat as well. And you don't have to put as much rub on the backside. There's not a whole lot of meat there, but just a light sprinkling will give that chicken a little bit more flavor. And we're doing the chicken on charcoal today because chicken picks up smoke flavor really, really nice, and the charcoal flavor just gives it that added bit of smokiness. So our charcoal is lit. We're going to add a little bit more into the slow and sear here. We're going to be smoking for about 3 hours or so, so we don't need to fill the whole thing, but we will need enough to make sure that we don't run out. And we'll just use a pair of tongs and make sure that the charcoal is piled up on one side. Gonna get the cooking grate on. And a couple of chunks of pecan wood. Pecan is a nice mild smoke. Works really well with chicken. Put the lid on and let it come up to temperature. Today we're shooting for about 250 degrees. Once we hit that temperature, you can see the smoke kind of rolling off there. We'll get the chicken on. The dark meat towards the coals. So that's the legs and the legs and the thighs facing towards the coals. And make sure we get our meat thermometer put right in the middle of the breast. Especially with chicken, I always cook by temperature, not by look and feel. And we'll get the lid back on, adjust our vents, make sure we're staying around 250. And we're sitting at 46 degrees now, so we've got a couple of hours to go before this chicken is ready. This was about a 4-pound chicken, and it took about 2.5 hours to smoke. Here we are, about an hour and a half in. And something to remember with smoking chicken is if you're going low and slow at 250 degrees, you're not going to get crispy skin on this one. If you were smoking this to eat as chicken and not put it in a stew, then you'd want to raise the temperature for the last little bit to about 350 degrees. And we've almost come up to our final temperature of 165 here, so it'll probably be about 10 more minutes and this chicken will be ready. We'll take out the meat thermometer and get this chicken on a cutting board. So you could serve it at this point, but we're going to turn it into a stew, which makes carving the chicken really easy. So get a pair of gloves because it's going to get messy and just start ripping it apart. We're not going to be using the skin in the stew, so you can set that aside or eat it if you want. Since we went low and slow, it's going to be pretty rubbery, and other than that, just start getting all the meat off that chicken. I'm mixing the dark meat and the white meat together because this is a stew, and so I don't really care if people get dark meat and prefer white meat. It all goes together really nicely once it's in the pot. Once you've gotten as much meat as you can off the carcass, it's time to start chopping vegetables. So we're going to use a leek here, most of the white part, and we're just going to slice that up and we'll set that into a bowl. And we've got 3 stalks of celery, which we'll also slice. You don't have to be too particular about how thick or thin you slice the celery. I like mine a little bit thicker. It gives a bit of a crunch in the stew, which I personally like, but you can go thinner if you don't like that as much. And 4 carrots, same thing. I didn't pay too much attention to how thick or thin I was slicing the carrots. They cook down really nicely in the stew and get really nice and tender. So 4 carrots is about enough, and then in about half-inch slices is how I do it. And a couple of potatoes. I usually prefer red potatoes for a stew, but I didn't have any, so I used Yukon Golds, and we slice them into about 1-inch cubes. And I used 3 small potatoes for this, or medium potatoes. And when you're going to start frying up some bacon, I would recommend chopping it up first. We don't really need it in strips because we're going to crumble it, and it'll cook a little faster if it's chopped. So I used about 8 strips of bacon for this recipe. You can use as much or as little as you want, but 8 strips seems to be the magic number I found. And once the bacon's nice and crisp, just take it out and put it on some paper towels to drain. And then into the bacon grease, we're going to throw our leeks. And we're going to saute these for about 2 minutes or so. Sauteing them will break them up from the slices that you see here and start to really tenderize that leek. Make sure you stir them constantly or they're going to burn. And once the leeks are tenderized and sauteed, we're going to dump in the celery. We're going to dump in the celery and the carrots, and let them saute as well for about 2 or 3 minutes or so. And after a few minutes, we're going to dump in the potatoes. Give those a stir around. And then we're going to add 8 cups of chicken stock. Once all the chicken stock is in there, we're going to give it a good stir. And we'll set it on a medium-high heat until we start getting a boil. Alright, our stock is boiling now. We're going to add a few more herbs. We're going to add into the pot our smoked chicken. Stir that in. We used about half the chicken. The other half you can use for wraps and sandwiches or whatever you really want to do. We're adding about a teaspoon of thyme, a teaspoon of rosemary, a sprinkling of basil and a sprinkle of oregano, and a pinch of salt and a pinch of black pepper. A good stir, and we'll let it simmer for about an hour. Once it's done simmering, we're going to add the bacon, and we're adding a cup of heavy cream, or alternatively a cup of milk with 2 tablespoons of cornstarch, and that's going to thicken up the stew for us. Give it a good stir and get it back up to a boil. And at this point, just keep stirring it every so often until the cornstarch or the heavy cream thickens to the point that you want it. You're also boiling off liquid at the same time, so we let ours sit for about 20 minutes and it boiled down to a nice, perfect stew consistency. Once you're happy with how it looks, scoop it into some bowls and enjoy a cup of smoked chicken stew from BBQLane.ca. If you like this video, hit us up, BBQLane.ca, like us on Facebook, subscribe to this YouTube channel. We're posting videos almost every week, and we hope you enjoyed our smoked chicken stew recipe.